Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another Short War video, and today we're receiving absolutely unprecedented news from the Polish Foreign Minister that there are currently active NATO troops deployed on the ground in Ukraine, but we don't know what their exact mission is, and the Foreign Minister of Poland would not say exactly which country they're from. But we do have a good idea where they did come from, and we've heard some particular individual, which is Macron, talking heavily about that for the last month. So we have all the details on that coming up, but certainly this is a major escalation and this is a flashpoint in history, I'm sure. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first post here, which is from Nexta. And in this post we can see the Polish foreign minister makes an unexpected statement about NATO soldiers in Ukraine, and it certainly was unexpected. He said, quote unquote, soldiers from NATO countries are already in Ukraine, and I would like to think the countries that are taking this risk, they know who they are, said Sikorsky, and he was commenting on the French President Emmanuel Macron's statement about the possibility of sending Western troops to Ukraine. So first off, the first question that comes to my mind is, was the Polish foreign minister supposed to say this out loud and publicly? Because this seems like something you might want to keep under wraps. But then again, maybe they sort of are working in tandem with France or whichever country sent these troops to sort of leak this information to the public to find out what the reaction might be if it became public that the troops were in Ukraine. So I'm kind of curious about that. But certainly, this is a major escalation here, and we're waiting to see exactly how Russia is going to respond to it, because I'm not really sure if the mission of the soldiers is of utmost importance to Russia. I think simply the presence of NATO soldiers in Ukraine at all will be a factor that causes them to take the situation to the extreme, and we'll have to wait and see what Russia is actually intending on doing, but certainly they will have a response. We need to see what kind of response that is going to look like, because it could be, anything from declaring war on the West, which is the most extreme option, or it could be simply turning a blind eye to it. However, I really don't think they're going to turn a blind eye to this. But then again, we don't know what the soldiers' mission is in Ukraine, so maybe that will play a factor, but we'll have to wait and see. But with that, let's move on to our next post here, which is also from Nexta. And we're getting word that the commander-in-chief of the Russian Navy, Nikolai Yevmenov, has been relieved of his duties as of today, according to Russian media reports. And we know exactly why this guy was probably dismissed. The Russian Navy has been taking an absolute beating from the Ukrainian forces in the past month. They've lost ship after ship, and of course, Putin can't afford that propaganda blow to his image there, so he's going to have to get rid of somebody, and who else to get rid of than the commander-in-chief of the Navy? So Nikolai is out, so someone's obviously going to replace him. We don't know who that's going to be just yet, but of course, another commander takes a fall for Putin's ego here. But with that, we're moving on to our next post, which goes to Nexta as well, and we're learning that Ukraine has accelerated the construction of defensive positions on the front line. And this was reported by British intelligence, and the analyst noted that this will create big problems for the occupants, and any attempts to break through the front will likely be accompanied by heavy losses. And the intelligence report specifies that the Ukrainian side uses anti-tank Dragon's Teeth and ditches, as well as infantry trenches, minefields, and fortified positions on the defensive positions. So this, to me, indicates that Ukraine is preparing to basically hunker down and get ready to ward off the Russians' advances, because the Russians are still advancing on the front line. They're not advancing very fast. They're advancing by maybe a couple of feet, but it is nonetheless an assault, and Ukraine must be prepared to deal with that to hold them off, so that way Russia gains no momentum and they can't overrun their forces. That is imperative to make sure that they can't do that. So Ukraine is taking this step here to accelerate the construction of these defensive positions to ensure that doesn't happen. So it's a good move indeed, and I'm glad to see that they are on top of that. And moving on to our next post here, we have another one from Nexta. We have a ton of posts from Nexta today, and we're learning that Russia has begun using a powerful aerial bomb that has decimated Ukrainian defenses, and the bomb weighs 1.5 tons, with almost half of it consisting of high explosives, and it's delivered from fighter jets from a distance of 60 to 70 kilometers, making it challenging for many Ukrainian air defenses. And that is the issue with this new aerial bomb, is the air defenses really can't hit it. And this is the FAB 1500, and it's characterized as a quote-unquote devastating weapon, and it highlights Russia's strategy of inflicting significant destruction before attempting to seize territory in the war in Ukraine. So this does indicate right here that while Ukraine is advancing and making new advancements in weaponry, Russia is also doing so itself in a more primitive way, But both sides are basically developing more and more abilities to take each other out, and Russia is doing the same thing here. So Ukraine will have to adapt to overcome this new advantage that Russia has, but I'm confident that they will very soon. And with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to the Euromaidan Press. And we can see here a massive fire has erupted in an industrial area near the Pulkovo airport in St. Petersburg, Russia, and it's engulfed approximately 1,000 square meters, and the airport has been closed as a result, and local officials had earlier reported repelling a drone attack in the area. So we have two options here. Either the Russian Lucky Strike man has struck again, or the Ukrainians have done a successful drone attack on this Pulkovo airport, and that is why the fire has broken out. But nonetheless, it is another fire in Russia, and y'all know how much they hate fires. That is their arch nemesis at this point, and Russia is continuously in a state of absolute fire, in a bad way. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which also goes to the Euromaidan Press, and this is about some very inflammatory statements that the Pope made yesterday that got some people very upset. And here we can see an official response from the Ukrainian foreign minister who told the Pope, "Our flag is yellow and blue and no others will fly." And like it says here, the Pope Francis has faced criticism for suggesting that Ukraine should have the courage to raise the white flag and negotiate an end to the war with Russia. Well, what would be better is, like I said the other night, if Pope Francis would go over to Russia and tell Putin, you should have the courage to raise the white flag because Russia is the one in the wrong, and they're the ones who are really actually taking massive losses because of their unjustified invasion of Ukraine. So the Pope's statements here were way out of line, and I don't understand why he made them. But the Ukrainian foreign minister was not the only one to get upset about it. We also saw here in our next post from Nexta that the president of Latvia said that one must not capitulate in the face of evil in response to the Pope's statement. And the Latvian president also said that one must fight to defeat evil so that the evil rises the white flag and capitulates instead. And that's basically exactly what I said right there. That's pretty much common sense. That's why everyone's saying that at this point. You know, Ukraine's not in the position to capitulate in the face of this evil. They shouldn't do that. And the Pope is so out of touch with reality when it comes to the situation. It's almost like hearing Elon Musk make a statement about it. It's just so uneducated and just really, really poorly chosen that he really should take that back and apologize for it. But with that, we also see here in our next post that Poland even responded to the Pope. Everyone got upset about this. He said, if Putin leaves Ukraine, there will be no need for negotiations. And like myself and the Latvian president said as well, how about for balance, encouraging Putin to have the courage to withdraw his army from Ukraine, then peace would immediately ensue because there would be no need for negotiations. And that is true, like I said a moment ago, and that just proves to you how wide-reaching that statement by the Pope got to make people very upset. So with that, moving on to our next post here, we're moving on to another one from Nexta yet again. And in this one, we're seeing that after the destruction of the patrol ship Sergei Kodov, the Russians minimized the number of warships in occupied Crimea. And we also see here that only those ships that could not find a place in Russian basing points are currently based there, according to a rep of the Ukrainian Navy, Pletenchuk. So this is a sophisticated way of saying that if the Russian ships basically were the odd man out and they couldn't find a place at Russian port to protect their vessel, well, they got screwed over and they had to go back to occupied Crimea to go and dock their ships there. So I'm assuming that the low-level commanders were the ones that got the short end of the stick, and now they're in the firing line in occupied Crimea, in the firing line of those Ukrainian drone boats. So it's quite a funny thing to see, and I'm glad to see that the Russian Navy is yet once again on the run because of Ukraine absolutely hunting them down and tearing their ships to bits. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which also goes to Nexta, and we're learning the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine says Baltic states will defeat Russia in case of attack, but will be like Bakhmut and Avdiivka. And personally, me, I would have to disagree with that. NATO is a very, very strong force, and we would come down on Russia so hard if they attacked one of our NATO countries that Russia would be wishing they had never done so and had simply collapsed beforehand. That's the truth of the matter. And also we see here that the foreign minister said, in the end, I think NATO will win, but look at Bakhmut, look at Avdiivka. This is what the Baltic countries will look like after intense fighting. And this is what your cities will look like. There will be no beautiful Vilnius. And I mean, certainly we would take damage, like we wouldn't come out unscathed. But then again, Ukraine is just one country. NATO is an alliance of many, many countries, and not just many of them, but the biggest in the world. And I really doubt that we'd end up looking at like Bakhmut or Avdiivka. Not to say that Ukraine isn't fighting hard, but they are just one force, and they have their limitations. So I'd have to disagree slightly, but I do understand where he was coming from on that point. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to Nexta as well. It says a monument to Prigozhin and Utkin are being erected in Russia, and those guys were the owners of the PMC Wagner. And allegedly, the figures of terrorists will be placed on the territory of the chapel in this place here in the Krasnodar region of Russia, and a mass grave of mercenaries from the PMC Wagner is located there. And, I hope to include on the monument that these two guys were actually assassinated by Putin, and that their monument goes up in the place of the country that ended up killing them. It's kind of weird here that they're doing this and putting up a monument because these two guys were kind of like wiped from history in Russia. They don't really speak of them anymore, and Putin sort of wants it that way. So why Russia is erecting a monument in their honor is beyond me. It's just a Russia thing. It's really weird here. I guess that Putin's decided he's going to not erase them from history. I don't really know, but Nutsack has his own monument now, and that's a little bit different. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which is also from Nexta. And we're learning that NATO countries are moving air defense systems closer to the border with Russia to strengthen Europe's defense capabilities in the Baltic region. And this is a wise move considering that NATO troops are currently in Ukraine. We should make sure our air defenses are ready to go because Russia could lash out in the most extreme way possible, and this is a wise move. But there's really not much to add to this. It pretty much is what it is. So with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to Nexta as well. And we can see here the Russians are escalating their use of chemical weapons at the front line, according to the AFU, and the Russians are increasingly using ammunition with a poisonous substance. And over the past week, they dropped grenades with a choking and tear gas agent almost 50 times from drones, said Dmitro Lykovy, who's the spokesman for the Tevria military unit. And to me, this is not as bad as it could be because it sounds like it's just simply tear gas agents. But if it gets to be anything more than that, that would be quite an atrocity because chemical weapons are banned, and even the tear gas is not a good thing, but it's not as bad as it could be. They could be dropping anything, as serious as Agent Orange or something like that. So, it could get worse, and I wouldn't put it past Russia that they would escalate beyond that point. But with that is actually our last piece of news for the day. And I hope you found this video informative today. And if you have, press that subscribe button and also press the like button as well, because that significantly helps us to get the news out. And you can also go and take a look at our Patreon page. The link is in the description below, and you can help support us financially over there as well. And that greatly does assist us with keeping the operation going. So with that is all for now. And we'll see you all tonight on our War News stream at 10 p.m. Eastern. And tonight is Sunday. It's fundraiser night, so be sure to join us then. We're going to try to raise some more money to help out Ukraine. And with that, bye-bye for now.